Scalability, in essence, refers to how an application is able to respond to additional load while maintaining the same level of performance by adding additional server resources such as CPU, memory, disk, or even additional servers in a web farm environment. Let's define scalability as something that refers to an application's ability to handle additional workload without adversely affecting performance by adding additional resources such as processor, memory, and storage capacity. Now, when we look at scalability, we want to fix performance so that the scalability of the application varies given a certain level of performance. The goal is linear scale. That is, we should be able to add additional resources, and with each linear addition of resources, we get an equal amount of additional workload that we are able to sustain. Let's look at some diagrams to drive home the differences between performance and scalability. First, let's look at performance. Here's an example graph showing how performance varies with the number of users on the system. This performance is showing how responsive the application is in terms of milliseconds for a given page request. We can see that as the number of users increases, the response time also increases. Now, in this case, we are shooting for a lower value, as we would most prefer to have our page respond in 0 or as few milliseconds as possible. It's also interesting to note that we have defined an acceptable threshold of 1 second or 1,000 milliseconds here, shown in red across the screen, and that you can see that up to 100 users can be supported on this system below the acceptable threshold. But once 125 users are hitting the system, the response time exceeds that threshold quite significantly. Next, let's compare this to some scalability figures. If we look at how the system changes as we add additional servers to it, we can see that in the first level we have 100 users being supported at a reasonable, acceptable threshold. This coincides with the first graph shown on the left. Now, as we add additional servers, you can see that the number of users supported increases. At 2, the number of users might be around 120, 125. At 3 servers, it might be up to 140 or 150. And at 4 and 5 servers, we can see that we're in the vicinity of 160 users being supported. Now, if we were able to support 100 users with one server, clearly, if we had linear scale, we would be able to support 500 users at the acceptable threshold with 5 servers. This is shown by the chart below, where you can see the ideal line is our linear scale line, and the actual line is the one that we just looked at, showing that up to about 160, 165 users are supported with 5 servers. In order to achieve linear scale, we will need to identify bottlenecks in our system and make it so that it is able to vary as much as possible with the number of servers being used, so that it achieves something closer to 500 users with 5 servers. Now let's look at why it's important to measure performance and scalability.